All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special edition of the Here We Are podcast, Pandemic Edition. I am here today with a fantastic guest. We have a fantastic story of how we met, or virtually met. Um, that we're going to share with you, but I'm talking with animal behaviorist and assistant professor at the University of Arizona. Jennifer Verdolin is joining me. Jennifer, thank you so much for being here.
Pleasure. Happy to be here.
So for anyone finding this for the first time, I've been doing this podcast for 5.5 years. I did all of them in person. They were always just audio, and then the world went into lockdown, and we've all had to make some adjustments and compromises. And I've tried to find silver linings anywhere that I can, and find new opportunities. And one thing that this has allowed me to do is talk with whoever I want to virtually, and or remotely rather, and even add it to YouTube. So this is we're just starting to do YouTube with the podcast, and also, which I think will add a lot for people. And then also doing which the podcast I've been doing one episode a week for the past 5.5 years, and now I'm doing multiple special editions, pandemic editions, talking about the current situation that we all find ourselves in, and examining it from as many different scientific perspectives as possible, giving people a different take than what they're used to hearing on the news. It's something that I do with my show anyway. For example, we basically don't really, very rarely talk about politics on this show. And when we do, it'll be like the genetic underpinnings that prime how people vote, stuff like that you don't hear anywhere else. And that's what I'm trying to do with this new exceptionally important topic. It's at least one silver lining is it's very nice to see people getting into science.
Yes.
Wouldn't you agree, Jennifer?
I completely agree. They're learning all kinds of new terms and concepts, and I'm happy about that.
Have you ever seen the world so interested in science in your lifetime? Because I can't think of any other time that people actually wanted to hear what scientists wanted to say, and such a high percentage of people.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And as a scientist, usually people just kind of there they go again, talking about things we don't understand. And I will say that many scientists have been able to translate a lot of information in really accessible ways during this time. And so I am, grateful for them, and to have joined the platform of helping to educate people, and loving that people are realizing how important scientists are to their very daily life.
Absolutely. This is something that I have been evangelical about for a long time. I guess I fancy myself a science communicator. I sure wish I was better at it. I sure wish I knew more. Science is endless. But it is something that has absolutely changed my life, bettered my life, helped me understand myself, others, the universe, the world, the environment that I find myself in. And I really am evangelical at a time where I was raised I was raised in a very religious church-going household, and it's interesting to now see a lot of those same religious people being like, what do scientists have to say? Now that now at the same time that scientists are like, maybe we should try praying.
Right.
So at times like this, everyone's trying everything they can, which is important, and it's good for us all to be open-minded and hear as many different takes as possible, I would say. And that's maybe not all the takes, but
Right, maybe not all of them.
but the point is I'm very excited people are getting into science. I've been, how we were supposed to first meet was you
Yes.
were supposed to do my live show. So one of the things I've been doing science themed solo stand-up shows for a long time, and over the last like year and a half or so, I started touring with the show Stand Up Science. It's a half comedy, half science show. I get 2 scientists in each city. I've done about 120 of them. I do it about 3 times a week, used to, when live events were still a thing that existed, before we all did like virtual shows from our bunkers. But the show is, I have me and a second comedian, and it's all a different show every time, but it's a half science talk, scientists giving talks, and half comedians doing sets, and then mixing it together at the end. It's a whole lot of fun. It's been the highlight of my career, and I don't even miss doing regular stand-up that much thus far, but I do really miss my science show. But anyway, we were meant to do one together in
Yes.
Glendale, Arizona, or as I was maybe even trying to get you for Tucson, where you are, and this was the end of February, and you were enthusiastic. We talked on the phone. You're enthusiastic about public outreach, and actually, why don't you tell people about your books that they can check out too,
Oh yeah.
as
Well,
people are
so
reading more than ever.
yeah, there you go. And I might be able to give away a few free audiobooks to help the cause. So
Awesome.
yeah, I was very enthusiastic because even though I'm a scientist, I'm also a science communicator, and I love comedy and mixing the two together. So really, connecting with you was kind of like a match made in heaven for me.
Yeah.
I've done lots of shows with different comedians, and then I've also written a couple books. And so one is Wild Connection, what animal mating and courtship, or actually courtship first, then mating, what courtship and mating tell us about human relationships. And the second one is Raised by Animals, which talks about the parallels we see with animals and how they raise their families and how we raise our families and what we might be able to learn from other animals. So that's kind of been my take, is how can we improve our lives, our relationships, our friendships, our work relationships, looking at how other animals handle things.
That's a big part of how I got into this in the first place. I'm a big fan of the David Attenborough documentaries and stuff. And I was doing, I had went through a bad breakup and was in an exciting relationship, and was writing a lot of relationship material at the exact same time that I was watching the most animal documentaries in my life. And I just started seeing so many parallels, and I was like, I got to look into this a little bit more, and started. I was into science before that, but I got really obsessive at that time. So I'm into I'm into all of that stuff. I've read a lot of stuff about animal courtship, and what it's a endlessly fascinating topic for me, but kind of related to, because this is a pandemic edition, and why I'm having you on, and why this is so relevant now is you canceled the show on me.
I
And
did.
I was like, what in the heck is going on? This lady, she's like, hey, there's this. So news-wise, I have my head in the sand, which I think ultimately is usually a pretty good approach. I think that the news is ratings based, and people respond to scientific or statistical anomalies that get blown out of proportion. Usually, obviously not in this case, but usually that's the case. And so I'm usually so anti every hype on the news, because we've been crying wolf about every damn thing for so long, every little shark attack or something like that. Now all of humanity doesn't want to go in the ocean,
Right.
even though your drive to the ocean is far more dangerous
Yes.
than the chance of getting eaten by a shark. So that's the kind of reason why I've kind of tuned out from the news. I even thought I was going to be a political comedian 10 years ago and used to watch the news nonstop, and so happy I didn't go that direction. But anyway, the point is, I was completely oblivious. I didn't know anything about this virus, and you're like, yeah, there's this virus, and I don't want to be in public and around people. I was like, okay. And then you're still like maybe interested in podcasting because we had talked on the phone, and you're like, maybe if we meet outside. It was strange because you're like, yeah, you can't come to my office. I'm like, well, I go to my guest home sometimes too. You're like, do you have like cat allergies? Right? Basically trying to like get me to not come to your house. But I wasn't totally picking up on the cues because I was just so confused. And I had never gotten this before.
Right.
Because this has never happened before. And then you were like, maybe we could meet outside and record. And I've tried that once before. It wasn't the audio quality and standards that, if listeners that are just hearing this, if you go back and hear my audio podcast, I have the highest standards. I'm having to make a lot of compromises to do this remotely. But so I was like, I'm sorry, I just, I can't compromise on my audio. Can you find a university space? And you're like, yeah, maybe, but you'd have to stay 6 feet away from me. And I'm like, what the hell is going on with this lady? And you're like, I just don't want to be around people that travel a lot, which I do. I'm in like 3 cities a week. And I shake a lot of hands.
I know.
By the way, also lick every railing that I see. Odd thing about me. But I'm sitting there going, what is going? And I was like, you know what? You seem a little on it. Like, let's do it next time around. We had a nice phone conversation and everything. I was looking forward to having you on, but I travel. I was like, I'll be back. We'll do it next time. And I remember you said, well, basically you didn't. You're like, crap's about to hit the fan. I would
Right.
stock up on some supplies, and this was at the end of February, and I was like, what is this lady talking about? And I didn't say that, but I was like, okay. And so now what I am saying right to your face is, I am very sorry. I I was completely oblivious, and even when the news did start coming in and permeating through my many news defenses that I use to try to block the same old loops and panic and outrage that usually exists over pretty benign things. I didn't pay attention to the warnings early enough, like a lot of people. I didn't take it seriously enough. Humanity. I don't trust herd mentalities very much, and I don't trust people's negativity bias sometimes, and people's ability to panic. And like I said, people have cried wolf so much that I'm happy to admit, I made huge mistakes all along the way. I was wrong. I was very wrong. And so now I'm in a bunker, and I'm stocked up. I got my supplies. I'm not going anywhere, and so now I want to know from the person who was the first person that I ever talked to about this stuff, that was way ahead of it before I had even heard whispers of anyone else. How did you know? How did you figure this out ahead of time? And by the way, to listeners, I'm going to be letting my guests talk a whole bunch more. That was just a long, like 10-minute rant, but we did. That's a very interesting backstory between us.
It was. And, and it's funny because, well, first of all, I did know, and you weren't the only one where I could hear okay, she's a little crazy in the voice,
Yeah.
even though you didn't say that to me, and you were very polite and gracious,
No.
even though I canceled on you 2 days before the show.
Yeah, I mean, me and my assistant may have said a few things behind your back.
I know. It's okay. And here's the thing, right? So I study animal behavior, and when I'm not communicating, the fun science, communication stuff, I study social networks. So basically, Facebook, Instagram, all of that for animals. And in my species, prairie dog, I've also studied disease dynamics. So how disease spreads through social networks. So for me, when about the middle of January, when I heard, and I don't watch the news either, actually, I'm not a big news person. For the same reasons that you brought up, I just find it really repetitive, alarmist, negative, and not super informative in any way.
Right.
But when I did see something about this, as a scientist, then I can go to other sources and I can, dig a little deeper. And so my antenna was tweaked a little bit, but not excessively so, just aware. And then by when China closed its borders, my antenna wiggled a little bit stronger. And I went, okay, well, now we have 6 million people left before they close the borders. The longish incubation time. This is a little worrisome. Okay. By the middle of February, my antenna was going even stronger. And so by the time I talked to you, I was really apprehensive about being in a room with many people, including my own students. So I was starting to feel really, really anxious in my own classroom, well before we went to completely online. And so I was balancing my reputation, and how you would see me with a real apprehension that had been building. And so obviously I decided I would risk you thinking I was just a flaky, nut job. And I was also warning my friends the same thing, not because I thought we would ever be out of toilet paper permanently. And today I had to go to the store and at considerable risk to try to, just score a few rolls, and I got 4 measly little rolls of toilet paper. And a month and a half ago or 2 months ago, this would never have been part of a conversation.
Yeah.
This
is now it's like a scene from Indiana Jones or something like that, trying to find some precious lost historical
Right.
treasure. Is about the same amount of effort that you need to find toilet paper these
Yeah.
days.
And the fear, okay, is it busy? Will people stay away from me? Because so I was wanting to do physical distancing, which they're calling social distancing, but I really prefer physical distancing because
that is a better term. Hey, listeners, let's all switch to physical distancing because we can stay social.
Yeah. And we can
You
stay
and I are
emotionally
being
connected.
social right now.
We are. And
having a heart-to-heart, emotionally connecting.
Yes. And so yeah, by the time the first week of March came along, I've been other than today where I went into the store and the store clerk came within 3 feet of me until I asked her not to, and then she got mad. I have not been within 6 feet of another person for over 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And so I think that people also need to suspend we're so used to being in each other's personal space, which I've never been a particular fan of. I have a pretty big personal space. Other animals have personal space boundaries too. And, like when I go for walks and I see a coyote, we collectively agree, me and the coyote, that, 30 feet is a good personal space boundary.
Right.
If either one of us encroach on that, I usually would get a glare, or, I start to feel a tad bit nervous, right? So, so anyway, I think it's normal that we all have personal space boundaries, and mine are just really expanded right now. And that's all we're really saying is expand your personal space boundaries to a minimum of 6 feet.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we should have like virtual hug apps and like hug IOUs. So you see your friend and you're like, hey, we'll mark this one. I owe you one hug when we do that behavior again.
Yeah, and the sad thing is that we get a physical response of hormones being produced and released when we have hugs, right? And so oxytocin, usually you need about 20 seconds, of solid hugging for your oxytocin boost, and so it's really hard, and so a lot of people might experience depression or increased anxiety because we're not getting the physical contact that is so much a fabric of social animals, and we are a social animal.
And in social animals, certain aspects of social bonding is also protective with the immune system too. I understand it. In under normal circumstances.
Yes.
Where everyone's healthy, having strong social connections is really good for your immune system. So this is just such a tricky situation for social animals.
It is.
I've been a hermit my whole life, so I have been prepping. I've been prepping for this. I went through the first half of my life. I went through all of school like nearly invisible. That prepped me for being awkward in crowds as an adult. I've been social distancing for a long time, but avoid eye contact with people. That's right. One. Then people don't talk with you. Don't go to parties. These are things that I've been practicing for 39 years.
Yeah. Well, and I've sat in the field in a forest for 8 hours a day for 6 months.
There you go. So, we were ready for this.
Yeah. So I still just talk to the animals. I mean, that's just, I have a hummingbird that comes every morning and I'm like, hi, how are you? Are you getting your nectar? Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
And and I make the rounds, and I know where my great horned owl is, and there was a pair of Cooper's hawks, but I think he got dumped and he's now alone. So I feel really sad for him that he's lost his girl. She went for another guy. And there's the squirrels and the spiders and the lizards, and I check on them every day as I go for my walk. And so I'm used to that, but what I'm not used to is not getting hugs. And something you said, so for something like social primates, other primates like baboons, we know that grooming, which is a form of touch, is super relaxing. Imagine somebody scratching your back or scratching your neck, or otherwise sort of touching you in some rhythmic way. It's super relaxing, and it reduces your cortisol levels and increases your pleasure center and your oxytocin, and it's all really good for your immune system. And we also know that social isolation affects social animals, including people and parrots and other social animals at the level of our DNA. So on our chromosomes, we've got these little eraser caps. I like to think of them called telomeres. And they're sort of just like the end on your chromosome. And as we age, they get shorter just by virtue of aging. And what we know in African gray parrots, when they are kept in isolation, because they're super social animals, when they're kept in isolation, you start to see a faster degradation of those little bits on the ends of their chromosomes.
Hmm. Um,
So we age
so at
faster.
just a much, yeah, so at a much higher rate than, well, the you know, this is a lot of a lot of you, you know, one thing that happens is people are older, and you know, a couple, one of them passes away, oftentimes the other one does but right after, and people are like, well, they must have died from heartbreak. Well, you know, I'm sure that's like, you know, one way of phrasing it, and that's a factor, but that's also who knows however many inflammatory responses and stuff set up when you're like, oh, I'm all alone right
Right.
now and there's no one to help me. Your cortisol levels are going to fly through the roof, and cortisol is probably, I imagine, going to do a lot of major player in inhibiting the immune system. I would think, as it's mobilizing energy to muscles and kind of short term
Right.
stress response. So
and I just want to point out that short-term stress response is okay, right? Because you take action and then those hormones just dissipate out. And you know, I like to make the analogy of like, let's say ducks, they get in a little conflict, and then you usually see the ducks like do this thing, right? And that's dissipating that energy. It's the chronic stress, which we're in this state right now, right? There's so much uncertainty. There's so much anxiety because we don't know, when will this end? When will it be safe? What's going to happen? How, you know, I can be anxious now because somebody came within 3 feet of me. Okay, how many days do I need to worry? Is it 5 days? Is it 3 days? Is every little cough gonna make me go, oh, okay? So this is different, right? Chronic stress is really different than
mammals are really great at stressing out at these kind of short acute passing stressors where we need to act fast and our reflexes need to take over, and then everything dials back down and goes back to normal afterwards. But yeah, if you don't shut that off, it's not a system that's well built for long stressors. I was curious as you were talking about all the animals, and so in terms of just sharing more bad news and more things to worry about for people. I mean, you know what? I've kind of been annoyed with people's positive thinking my entire life, and now when people are just like, well, you just got to stay positive, I'm like, well, you know, being positive is like good when it's called for, but also being positive can make people oblivious and not plan and not assess real danger. I was thinking quite positively that we wouldn't be in this scenario right now, and that didn't help anything. But one thing that I haven't heard about, as we're talking about our animal friends, what about people with pets? What about, you know, you're in a family and you're all kind of like going out and about a little bit still, you know, some people are still working, there's still people that need to be clerks and say a nurse or whatever else, and they're coming home and they have their own, you know, wing of the house. You have everything set up. I packed up all my stuff because stand-up science is taking off for me. I put it all in storage, and I've been living on the road, which has been a dream of mine for some time, to be home free for a few years, and I was absolutely loving it. But then when a pandemic happens, home free turns to homeless. And so now I'm back at my parents' house in Wisconsin, hunkered down in my parents' basement like a real internet troll. Meanwhile, I'm really getting into character. A bunch of like angry tweets and arguing with people online. I'm really taking on the role of guy who lives in parents' basement, and and I have my childhood, bedroom, and then I have a bathroom right outside of it. And I was like, I've been traveling a lot. I'm just going to hunker down there I have a separate area where my food and stuff is.
Right.
So say I was like a nurse and going out each day, and I have this separate area, and I'm doing the 6 feet thing and everything else. And what happens when my dog, or my cat or something comes by? Is this a contamination threat?
Okay, so this is a really great question, and I'm so glad you asked it. I've actually put together, and I'll put it out later, a little public service announcement video for people about this issue.
Oh, great.
Yeah, because there's a ton of misinformation happening. So,
can you? I don't want to forget. Where can people find that? And
oh, sure.
More.
So on Twitter, I'm at Real Dr. Jen, and that's just Dr. Jen. And on YouTube, I have a YouTube channel called Wild Connection TV, where I've been doing other videos, but I'm going to be putting out a few specific to this situation.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so the thing is that I've heard reports of people abandoning their pets, about pets being poisoned, and fear that dogs can transmit this virus or become infected with it and infect us. So very clearly, cats and dogs and other pets, there's no evidence at all that they become infected with coronavirus or COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2, all of the names that this is going by. There was, I think, confusion happened because of the 2 dogs that tested weekly positive in Hong Kong. But thousands and thousands and thousands of tests have empirically shown that they do not get infected with the virus. And this is supported by the British Veterinary Association, the American Veterinary Medical Association, various, the CDC and the World Health Organization. So then the question is, people have, well, what happened, right? How come they tested positive? So the thing to know, and in answer to your question, is your dog could be a potential conduit of contamination.
Yeah, I cuddle with my dog, and it doesn't need to get the virus itself.
That's right.
Now it's all over its fur, and then my dog goes and cuddles with. I don't have a dog right now, but I'm quite lonely and could use a.
I know. I know, but yeah. So it's like any other surface, right? So
right.
Or any other person.
Of
so
course.
Just like you wouldn't be cuddling with anyone else right now, you don't want to cuddle with your dog or your cat if you are in quarantine in some way. And even if you are healthy and you are taking your dog out and it's greeting another dog, or other people are petting your dog. Right now, physical distancing should include keeping our pets physically distant from other people and other pets. And this is only because it's the same as any other object or person. Now, we know this virus stays infectious for different amounts of time, depending on the surface. And it stays less infectious, or it stays infectious for less time on soft surfaces like fur, clothing, cardboard packaging than it does on hard surfaces, with the exception of copper. That one's 4 hours. But metal, plastic, floors, right? Other surfaces, it can stay infectious for days, even though it declines with each passing amount of time. So our pets are just like any other people in our family unit or in our lives, where I'm quarantined with Senor Buttons, my cat, and I'm not quarantined because I've been exposed in any way, but I'm acting like I have the virus to be a responsible citizen. All cats should be kept indoors anyway, unless they're being walked on a leash. And in our case, he doesn't really like leashes, so we just are confined to our little outside patio, supervised. Dogs should always be on leashes anyway, but now is a very good time to make sure your dog is on a leash. And this is to protect you as much as it is to protect others.
Mm-hmm.
Because today, in terms of, I just went to the little mailboxes to see if my special coffee arrived. I'm trying to cling to small things of normalcy,
Yeah.
just justifying fancy coffee for as long as I can get it. And
well, that's why I'm still being a cynical jerk as much as possible, just so I can really stay true to who I am, and
there you go.
and hold on to that.
Yeah.
I know. So anyway, we all have our things.
We do.
We all have our like little touchstones.
Yes, right. And so things that make us feel comfort and reduce that stress level. And if it's being that way, then do it.
I joke because really comedy is my release. It's what I've used
Mm-hmm.
my whole life through ups and downs, and
right.
especially in hard times.
Right.
It's funny too, because people are like, "Oh, you can't joke about this very serious situation." It's like, well, I've joked about every horrible thing ever in my life.
Right.
It's the only survival skill that I have.
Right.
And most comedians' only survival skill. Like,
right.
I'm not making light. Like, this is the scariest thing I've ever gone through in my life. I'm not happy that this is happening. It's just we all have our different ways of coping and articulating.
Yeah. I mean, I told all my friends I was working on my prison body.
Yeah.
Like by the time summer rolls around, I'm going to be able to do 10 normal half push-ups.
Yeah. I mean, I think humor is one of the few reliefs from stress that we have right now. I mean, I do think that it's tricky because we want to be informed. I do think learning more about this stuff and just being more informed can really give people a sense of power and control. In terms of when we talk about stress, there's the two main factors would be lack of predictability and lack of control over a situation, as I'm sure in many animal studies and everything else. And if we embolden ourselves with as much knowledge as possible, maybe not this exact same thing on a loop reminding us and ruminating that way, but just really trying to sit back and understand and use caution, that even if you're in a house, even if you're in a cabin in the woods far away from everything, and you're at like zero risk of actually being exposed to this stuff, that the placebo of doing the steps to feel in control are going to be good for people's immune system. So
for sure. And I think actually that part of what you're saying is so important, because I think it helps explain the panic buying. Mm-hmm. Because I think it's self-soothing, honestly. I think that buying and buying and buying is making people feel they have some control over something.
Yeah. I have a 3-year supply of toilet paper.
That's
I don't totally get, like, are we pooping more with this?
No. But I think happening? I think that I don't know what that is about.
I get why people would want lots of food, like,
right?
But I mean, or more, what are, like, more books or more like music equipment that like, oh, I've always wanted to learn guitar, I'm going to be hunkered down for a while, I've been meaning to read more books and I have not. I get why, like, more of things specific to this situation, but with the toilet paper thing, I have enough to be like hunkered down for a while, but I mean, the videos of people just hoarding like boxes upon boxes of like a year's supply of this stuff. It's like, what are
Right.
and now the toilet paper industry, who I'm sure can just crank out 1,000 times the amount of toilet paper they normally do and fill the stocks back up. You know, in a month, every single person on Earth is going to have a 2-year supply, and then they're going to be like, okay, I guess we don't sell toilet paper for the next 3 years. So
I don't know what that's about, because my first thought was, well, I mean, we do have, like, water has not shut off. Among countries, there are countries where they don't have access to water and they don't even have access to toilet paper. But, we have water, and we have,
shit.
oh yeah, like a third of the world doesn't actually have toilet paper, right? So we have water, soap, and that's perfectly reasonable. So I think, again, I think
more soap. Obviously, we're going to need more soap, more sanitizer, more like those things are the things that, like, okay, I get why people are hoarding that stuff, but
still the hoarding is unnecessary. I think that again, I think that we could tell people the hoarding isn't necessary, but we're not giving them real ways to lower their anxiety. Right. And so I believe that sequestering resources in a way that people haven't, they also may be buying more because they don't know if they're going to lose their job, and they may not have money later. So
they're running it all on a credit card now, and then.
Right. Yeah. And so I think there's a lot of anxiety that's driving the pattern. Unfortunately, as long as the perception of scarcity exists, it's just a positive, it's a positive feedback loop that's negative.
Yeah, and then, the news shows only the pictures of the empty shelves, not the pictures of all the full shelves, and
right.
And I promise you, I could go in around my hometown. If I just ran up all my credit cards, going and buying every single pen and pencil at every, like, Staples and grocery store and everything in town, all of a sudden everyone would be like, oh my God, are we running out of pens? Oh, we need to get pens. Do we need a 3-year supply of pens? It would just trigger their scarcity, and people are, a lot of us are a lot of people don't know what to do, so they're just picking up on social cues from others, and a lot of people are followers, and for one reason why some people are followers, and compared to me, which is I always go against the grain, is because sometimes going against the grain is horrifically costly for you, and makes you not do the things that you actually should be doing. But for people to tease apart what is, like, logical approaches right now, and then like teasing that apart from what is the general consensus, and teasing that apart from, like, what on the news is actually relevant, and then all of a sudden we need to get everyone caught up to speed on how statistics work, and things like exponential growth, and analyzing actual data and numbers, and what that look. I mean, some of these graphs that you see, like, circulating around, there's, like, no numbers or anything on them. It's just like a picture, there's no
there's no context.
There's no context or anything, and people are just like, oh wow, it's a graph, I guess it's saying something.
Well, and I just want to say that I don't want to normalize the hoarding behavior, right? I don't want to normalize it, but I do want to explain it. And so just like you, I mean, I went today to the supermarket. I didn't want to, but I went early where there was fewest people. And other than that one clerk who just, anyway, I found.
You can share her name or their name.
I don't know her name, but I really tried to tell her, I'm trying to keep you safe as well. This is not like a personal affront here. This is just reminding you, those images of penguins just slamming into each other, trying to go off into the water. Like, if you find yourself doing that, just stop, right? look up from your phone and pay attention to around you. But I found toilet paper, and I only,
I take issue with that. I will not look up from my phone. That is the one thing that is the one thing I will not do.
Well, then use your peripheral vision while you look down.
All right.
All right, which we don't have terrific peripheral vision. But so, I found toilet paper, and I just did a quick scan to see what is empty and what is there. There was no milk. There were no eggs. There was plenty of produce, lots of fresh fruits and vegetables. And I'm like, okay,
what do you got to do to get people to eat fruits and vegetables, by the way?
Yeah, I mean, I got some great bananas and avocados and lettuce. And so, I didn't really dilly-dally. I went with a purpose. But the thing is that when we perceive scarcity, it triggers something that it's very common in primate behavior and primate ecology. It's called scramble competition. And there's contest competition, and that's where you fight over that box of pizza, of spaghetti, or that, toilet paper roll thing, and whoever's strongest wins. But scramble competition is more like what we've been seeing, which is whoever can get there first takes it. And fortunately, the supermarkets and other places are starting to implement, limits to how much.
My mom went to the store and got some. She was saying she got some cans of I think like soup broth or something like that today. And she is getting more. We already have like a few weeks supply, but just more for whatever she wanted to make. And they had limited to her like 4 cans of broth or something like that, which is sensible. That stores obviously need to be doing this. I wonder if there's even going to anyway.
But so it's just sort of, it's something that, from a behavior standpoint, we know happens with other animals. And we like to think as humans, we are not animals, but we are animals, and also other animals physically distance. There's a little less flexibility than what we have, because we can stay socially connected, but physically separate. I know people may not be thrilled about bats these days, because they're sort of suggesting that this virus originated in a bat and then had an intermediary and then made the jump to people. But bats are suffering from a disease that we've spread around the world, which is white nose syndrome, which is a fungus. And there's 2 bats that are handling this very differently. So when bats are really social and they roost or hibernate together closely, their population numbers go really way down because they die from this fungus. And
I learned about this. I had a researcher on Stand Up Science in New Hampshire recently, and that it's a big issue there. Do you know that? Quick aside, do you know that what's the fungus called again? So
it's white nose syndrome.
Oh, white nose syndrome. Do you know do you know the origins of that? It was one caver who they actually traced it back to one person who was like from a different country, came here, went caving. There was something on his shoe or something. It wiped out the bat population, and like. Imagine that knock on your door when someone comes and like, just hey, heads up, just so you know, you inadvertently wiped out the bat population.
Yeah. I mean, but that's the thing, right? So that's how these things work. Yeah. We have not found, I think, in this case yet for humans, patient 0, right?
Right.
The original person from Wuhan, right? But it has been devastating for all kinds of species of bats, and many of them may ultimately go extinct. But there's this difference between the big brown bat and the little brown bat. So they both hibernate in social groups, but in response to this disease, some individuals in the little brown bat are staying further away from other little brown bats in caves. They aren't as closely packed, and they're surviving. So here we have a social species that is doing physical distancing, and it's saving them. And not all social animals have that flexibility, right? And what we're being asked to do is to have that flexibility and embrace that and do it well and responsibly. And we may be doing it for far longer than 2 weeks.
Oh yeah, I imagine we will be. And I mean, humans are the most flexible species this Earth has ever seen. So hopefully we can use our vast physical and psychological toolkit that we've evolved with to adapt to these and learn really quickly. I mean those bats that started social distancing, you know, that's something that I imagine is a preference that got selected for through generations pretty quickly. Well, yep. we don't want to wait generations, and Unfortunately humans have this capacity. We're amazing tool makers, and we have this capacity to communicate and spread information and learn more through tools like science, which is my favorite of the human tools out there, and to inform ourselves and potentially change our behavior when all of a sudden there's a massive shift in the environment. And so there might be, you know, related to when you're talking about produce, you know, another thing people might need to know about what our inclinations are at this time is that when people are stressed, they make poor diet decisions.
They do.
And so people are probably ignoring a lot of the produce because they're making sure that they have their supply of Cheetos and everything on hand. And,
well, which is a shame because you want to eat well. I stopped drinking 6 weeks ago. Not that I drank vast quantities. I didn't try, you know, I'm not an alcoholic, but, you know, I drank wine and
I am.
Well, I want to be, but you know, I looked at the effect that alcohol has on our immune system, and I was like, you know, I'm going to just put a pin in that, and I'm going to circle back to wine, you know, later. It'll always be there, I'm sure, and I let go of. I don't smoke, so that's not an issue. I don't vape, so that's not an issue. And really just made
how do you be cool and
well, the only person here I'm trying to impress, I mean, although I did ask for extra time, I did ask for extra time, you know, to try to attempt to look pretty. Thank you. But yeah, Buttons, you know, he's never impressed with me, so it is irrelevant what I do or don't do. He's only
cats can often be good social distancers. Anyway, physical distancers, I should say.
He's pretty good. Like it's funny because I think by the 4th day he looked at me like, "Why are you still here?" And now he's got me very well trained. We go out on the patio in the morning, and then around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I build him a fort, and he goes and sleeps in his fort.
Oh yeah, Senior Buttons needs a fort, of course.
He's always loved to have a fort to nap in.
What is Senior Buttons like? Shoe boxes?
He doesn't. No, he likes tents, like a tent.
Okay.
And I've just never been home at the right time of day. He doesn't like tents at night, only in the morning, or only in the afternoon.
Tents. Sure, makes sense.
So you know, he likes the bed turned down for him in the evening. He doesn't like to lay on top of the comforter. You know, we switch sides periodically through the evening. I'm usually pretty territorial about my side of the bed.
Yeah.
But
I bet Senior Buttons knows how to get his way too a little bit though.
Yeah, he does. He wakes me up, and then and then that's my cue to move over. Really.
Yeah.
So you know, it's been interesting. He's 16 and a half and a bit of a grumpy old man. but he's my pal right now, you know?
Speaking of, I'm going to speculate wildly. It's not even that I think this is true. It's just a thought that had crossed my mind when we were talking about, animals being surfaces that you're interacting with and are moving about, and animals don't realize that all of a sudden they're needing to be on leashes more than they used to, or whatever. They're unaware, and so I was thinking. So the last place where my stuff's in storage right now is in Vancouver, Washington, right outside of Portland, Oregon, right on the border there. And the culture there is such that cats just like roam the streets all of the time, and cats will like when I lived there, the neighbor cat would come over to our place and we'd let it inside and pet it, and then it would go, and who knows where it would go, and it would make the rounds. And I imagine other neighbors, people without cats leave milk and stuff out for neighborhood cats and things all of the time there. And and I don't know if there's a correlation, but Washington was like the worst hit state out there. And
well, yeah, I mean, I don't want to blame cats, right? But
I
yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's what I'm getting at. I want to blame.
I could feel that. I could feel that.
No, I want to blame cat. I want to blame. No, I guess I bring it up just because I'm not blaming cats or their owners. I'm just saying in terms of effects and and dangers that are maybe flying under the radar.
Yep.
Not the best time to let your animals roam out and
right.
about.
And also, if you do touch someone else's dog or or cat, just wash your hands.
Burn your hand off. Wash your hand with lighter fluid.
No, yeah, I mean, yeah, basically. Just torch everything at that point.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you a couple things.
Sure.
Which is so normally on the podcast, I didn't prep you for this or anything because it's a different question than I normally ask. Normally, in the 5.5 years of the Here We Are podcast, I'd have my guests name a charity of their choice each week. However, and you're welcome to do that as well, but however, I didn't prep you for that. I in these special episodes, I think science needs all of the resources and interest and spreading and that it can possibly get. So I would love for you to give like a couple simple tips for listeners that are now just finding themselves interested in science. One, I think a lot of people are going to start listening to science because they want to stay alive and survive a pandemic. But I think once people get into science, they're going to realize, oh, this is actually very, very interesting stuff. And the scientific conversations are, by and large, just far more interesting than a lot of the same kind of small talk that we're used to hearing all of the time. And people are going to take notice of that, and it's going to change the way people interact with one another and have their conversations. I always hope that at the very least my podcast makes people just a little more interesting in conversations, because that's a great way for science to keep spreading, and so I want to know that if you have some ideas of what people can do to support the sciences in any way. Sure. And then I want to talk about the future a little bit. I want to ask you. I want to very selfishly ask you, only because I find it helpful to make things people tend to relate to personal examples more. But I want to tell you about my kind of current situation in terms of what I'm having to do to plan for my future and get some guidance from your magical crystal ball that that you wield so modestly.
Okay. Well, I will tackle all of those. So I do want to, if I could, I do want to just advocate for one charity that really matters to me, and that's the Center for Great Apes. And it is a sanctuary in Central Florida that houses currently 54 chimpanzees and orangutans, including Bubbles, Michael Jackson's old chimp. So it is a sanctuary for for ex-pet chimps and orangutans and entertainment industry chimpanzees and orangutans. And I got my start there many, many years ago with the original 6 chimps and orangutans. And they are currently facing shortages of many things, like all of us. And we don't know for sure, but we suspect that other apes, chimpanzees, orangutans, in captivity and in the wild, can become ill, very ill, from this particular virus. So we share over 99% of our genetic makeup with them. And so there are huge concerns. They have a wish list on Amazon, and it's the Center for Great Apes, and they always list things that they need. And if it's in stock and you can afford to give, then that's great. And I'm doing that every 2 weeks, because I've been fortunate enough where I'm teaching online, so I'm still having an income, and that's what I'm choosing to do in my particular case. When it comes to science, so gosh, tips for getting access to great scientific content, is that sort of where you were?
Just anything, or even if people just want to do more to promote any specific scientific causes, or ways in which people could vote a little more pro science would be an easy one for people.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, that would be great if I would say start local, right? Maybe check out your local university and see what the projects are. You could get involved from a citizen science perspective where you're helping. I have a great horned owl project. It's currently, on hold, but I've got at least 10 or 15 citizens in the surrounding area who are either collecting pellets or watching the birds, or I'm trying to do something on facial recognition of owls for IDing them. And so I have a couple of great photographers who go out and they're taking, photos for me. So that's one way to support science, because I can't get any grants. Nobody from a funding perspective cares about my little owl project. Right. And so we have a hard time.
If you were like trying to fix erectile dysfunction or something like that, people would take notice and you'd have all the funding in the world. But
that's true. But owls don't have penises, so that's not helpful.
They're not terribly aerodynamic.
They have no possibility for that in the first place, so I couldn't possibly fix it. So
I'm just talking about the human condition of what priorities are of
absolutely
of what they care about fixing and what they take a interest in. That was just a little slam on the human condition.
Well, and it's quite sad for owls, actually, that they don't. They can't have that problem. But I think, so that's one way, right? Look to how you can support your local researchers. And that means that you can pick and choose based on what matters to you and what somebody's doing. And then there's also some SciFund is a way for crowdsourcing that different researchers put up their projects and try to get support that way. And then there's definitely voting. And I think that while we're in this situation, take an opportunity. If you like to walk outside, do it responsibly, avoid crowds, avoid parks where people are aggregating, and just take a walk and notice how clean the water is right now. Notice how fresh the air is right now, because we have stopped a lot of activity, and maybe help by making better choices, we try to put all the responsibility on individuals. Well, I've got my little reusable bag, but the corporations are the ones that are really driving much of the pollution and habitat destruction and all of that. And so where you choose to spend your money in the future can really have a powerful impact. What businesses you support, what sectors, so supporting green energy over others, can really make a bigger difference, as well as your own personal choices.
Yeah. And going back to people looking up their local university, I can tell you from one of the joys of getting to tour with my show, Stand Up Science, and getting all different guests each time, is that I've had so many examples of this where often academics are kind of crowdsourcing a lot of their research and getting opportunities for the public in really fun ways, and even doing like informative nature hikes and surveys that people can fill out. There's like there's a zillion different ways that people can get involved in science with not having to spend a ton of time to look into it. So in closing, let's talk about me.
Okay. Absolutely.
I've been canceling shows left and right. I've officially canceled shows through the middle of April, and it's only, all of April's gonna be done. I just haven't. I've been busy with a bunch of other things, and I haven't advertised them or anything anyway. So I've had no like direct incentive to really cancel the shows, because no one's getting tickets right now anyway. But the point is April's done for me. I sure was hoping to have a big tour firing back up on May 9th. Sounds like that's not going to happen. So just May is completely done.
I would say, yeah.
What about June?
Well, so whether or not, so that's about 10 weeks from now, right? So
bear in mind that my venues are like 150, 200 seat venues. So when things do open up again, it's going to be the first venues to start opening up, before stadiums and stuff.
Okay, so I don't want to be completely destroy your future. So I'm going to just say that we're looking at 8 to 10 weeks. If we look at other countries and how long they've had to keep this in place, and we'll see what happens to them as they start to relax some of those restrictions. I would say that 150 to 200 is too many to hope for in June. I would say that if a venue wants to offer it, it should be like 50 people, and they should be spread out, and you don't shake anybody's hand.
Yeah.
And I'm not terribly optimistic though about June.
Okay,
and
no June.
I'm
listening to you. I
didn't say no. I just said I'm not optimistic because I don't think we're going to necessarily do things simultaneously, massively, and in coordination all over this country at the same time.
Yeah.
So
it's just that if I have so my situation is such that if I have things in the books, if things start opening back up, I'm ready to go in 2 weeks. I don't advertise much more than 2 weeks ahead of time anyway.
Right.
So I can theoretically move things back and then cancel again and keep on rescheduling.
Right.
And so I'm just wondering what is the optimistic safe side, knowing full well that I'll probably end up canceling those anyway.
Well, so maybe June, and advertise it as an intimate evening with you in a large space.
I've been thinking about doing shows out in parks.
You could do them, and there's lots of amphitheaters actually that are in open spaces. But the key is that your audience needs to be able to sit far enough away from each other. Yeah. For them to feel comfortable, even outside.
Great for comedy too, by the way. laughter is contagious as well, and very dependent on cues from other people around, and no one wants to be the only one that they can hear laughing. So the 6 feet apart thing, that'll work just fine for music. I don't think it's gonna work for comedy.
Right.
So so when are we gonna be able to be within 3 feet of one another? July?
Well, I don't know. And I don't know when people will actually feel comfortable. So there's two
Right.
things to consider, right? One, that it's actually okay, and two, that collectively we feel okay about doing that. And so I think that there's going to be a subset of the population that will feel fine about it in 2 months. And if things go, if we actually succeed in reducing the speed at which this is transmitting and growing, right? That's the key, is can we slow it down? And really, we are trying to slow it down just to help the hospitals and right.
I mean, I have zero interest in putting anyone in danger or anything. It's just not that big of a deal to me.
Yeah.
A lot of people are in a much worse shape than I am, even though I'm stretched very thin myself, and 95% of my income is from live touring. Mostly it's just about having to pay my assistant and pay the people that pay for me and support me on Patreon, and help get them paid if you want. But so I can keep doing these. But as far as I'm concerned, I can hunker down in a bunker and still do my podcast, which I love doing this podcast more than anything in the world. And so I'm not trying to complain here. I don't. I
know.
have a much worse situation than I do, and I absolutely want to be way more safe than sorry in terms of live touring.
Yeah.
It's not like I'm like, I need to get back on the road. I don't I want people to be safe, but just knowing that I can cancel things 2 weeks in advance, and it's
Right.
no skin off anyone's back. I'm trying to decide what is other than the hours it takes to rearrange things and book stuff in the first place.
And
I think probably no shows until July, I bet. You think bars are going to stay closed like that?
I mean, I don't know. So I will just say that, well, I can't predict what will happen. I know I'm already, and I'm always a little bit ahead.
Yeah.
I'm already, my antenna is just like, let's see which way the wind is blowing, because I already feel anxious slightly. It's in the future of resuming in-person classes in the fall. I'm not sure that that's going to even be wise.
Oh.
So that's me, though, and as we know, in this scenario, I have and I would love to be proved wrong. Actually, I would love to be incorrect about all of that, and realize that it's just maybe a little but I got to see how other countries go and how the data goes in the next month or two to see where are we going to be at that time. And that's just my own sort of assessment and analytic mind that puts pieces of the puzzle together in its very nice and strange picturesque way. So I would say, yeah, I mean, maybe looking at once May is done, seeing what's happening. And as far as bars go, I think they have allowed now takeout to include alcohol. And from what I saw in the grocery store, there's plenty of alcohol. I'm not sure that everyone should be sitting at home drinking alone. That's probably not great for your mental well-being.
Oh, great! Now we're all gonna start the New Orleans drive-through daiquiri shops. The craziest, most insane thing on in the country. But now they're gonna be everywhere.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think that. We'll get a better sense of where things will be in the next month, right? So if I were to talk to you again in 3 or 4 weeks, I might have a different assessment, or I might have a different sense. And again, I speak from what I'm comfortable with. And while I may sit back and think others should or shouldn't do certain things, you know, at
Oh,
least
I'm listening to you. I made that mistake once already.
Well, I just want to say, like, I didn't scream it from the from the rooftops. I only told people that were my friends and that I cared about. And so, for whatever reason, I felt compelled to. I was worried about you because you were going to so many different places, and I know how comedy clubs work, and I know that we greet and meet and shake hands and people come up after the show and want to talk to you.
Comedians aren't the most healthy people either. I had actually started smoking cigarettes here and there again, and I quit when all this stuff happened. So that's the one good thing that came out of this. Been cut way back on drinking and everything as well. It's been at least a week or so on that too.
Yeah.
So
good for you.
So yeah, well, trying to make the most out of this situation. I mean, I'm kind of a dark person, so I'm like I'm kind. I don't think this is impacting me as negatively emotionally as a lot of people. I've always kind of thought of the world as a pretty dark, tragic place, and so I was kind of built for an apocalyptic setting psychologically.
It's kind of why I hang out in the forest so much. But I do want to leave everyone with just one thing, which is we kind of have an interesting choice, right? So in ecology, we have these concepts of resistance, where you get some kind of disturbance to the system and it tries to go back to its original state, or you try to return it to its original state. And then we have something that we know works much better, is to build for resilience. And this is where after disturbance, you find a new way forward. And I think that this
Anti-Fragile.
Yeah, well, and I think
have you heard, that's a book I haven't read, but I believe that's the premise of it.
Okay. Well, I think that what I would like to see, and it goes counter to the world is a dark and tragic place, is that maybe I'm not seeing evidence of it so far, although in little pieces and little pockets of an opportunity to really cooperate and to share and to help each other. And I think that there's many of us who are trying to embrace that idea. And that's a hope that I might have, that when the disturbance, when the perturbation is done, that's our new normal, that's our resilience.
Well, even things that are going to become quite obvious for people, which is that a lot of people are now, a lot of people that should have been probably working remotely or had the option to work remotely 10, 20 years ago, but companies were just doing, avoiding that because it's the way that it's always been, and can you trust that people will work, and blah, blah, blah. And now that people are forced to do this, are we going to have the same number of commuters out there all of the time, burning through our fuels and everything else? I mean, like you said, there's less pollution, there's cleaner water and everything, and that might be, although I'm against having a sedentary lifestyle, but I think working remotely for people gives people the option to exercise and stuff more than ever, and take healthier breaks and work it more on their own hours. It might increase, I think it'll increase productivity rather than having people trapped, trying not to get caught playing solitaire because they're stuck in their little cubicle prison. People can take the breaks that they want. They can have a podcast on in the background and not be as miserable. And something like that could that's one small thing that could lower the carbon footprint a little bit, which if we don't lower the carbon footprint, there's going to be a lot more apocalyptic scenarios heading our way. So this is an interesting time for reassessing. and by the way, when I say all this, I do not trust my crystal ball in one way or another, listeners. I'm just wildly ranting and speculating myself. But speaking of which, I encourage all of your viewpoints. Please ask any comments or questions. Leave them in the YouTube comments. Leave them on my Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, and I'm going to be doing as many of these episodes as I can. So if you had a question that came up during this interview, during this podcast, make sure and ask it anyway, because we're going to be I'll have opportunities to ask it of other people in other fields in the future. And so I just want to thank you, Jennifer, for being such a wonderful guest and for trying to warn me and save my life. You can ask my parents, who I now live with. I'm not the best at listening.
Well, you were still very, very warm and gracious, and I'm so glad that we did in fact get to do the podcast. And
me too.
And I look forward to when you are touring again, that we get to do what we planned to do originally. And so
I keep on almost touching my face. I'm like, oh, we don't do that anymore. It's some of these habits are going to die hard. I want you to one more time plug for people your Twitter and where they can find you on YouTube, and anything else that they can check out your books again.
Sure. Yeah. So on Twitter and Instagram, my handle is @RealDrJen, and that's just DR, not spelled out doctor. And my YouTube channel is Wow Connection TV, and there I have a couple of think like a human, act like an animal videos. I do some series on women in science, and then just some general sort of science adventures. Since we're all holed up, I'm going to do one on who's in that hole, to try to figure out what animals are living in which holes. And and so I hope that people find that entertaining, interesting, and they can also ask me anything, and I will happily answer, and or if they want to see some particular topic that they're interested in, I'm happy to oblige.
I think they will. I think this is the biggest positive change that I'm hopeful is going to come out of all of this, is that people are going to start having respect for science and expertise and learning. That's a world that I dream of. So thank you, listeners, for being such a wonderful, curious people and tuning in. And usually I'd say I'd talk to you again next week, but we're gonna try to be cranking out as many of these episodes as fast as possible. So just stay tuned. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, and I'll talk soon. Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you.